Welcome back to the Quantum Soul. I am so excited for this deep dive, where we take all those research articles you've been meaning to get to, and we distill them into pure knowledge gold. And today we're exploring a concept that's fascinating and a little bit mind-bending.
Okay.
The idea that trauma, while incredibly difficult, might actually hold the seeds of transformation and even power.
It is a perspective shift, isn't it? Moving away from seeing trauma solely as a wound and instead considering it as a potential catalyst for profound change.
Exactly. The source material we're diving into today explores this idea through the lens of Kundalini psychology and very spiritual traditions. It gets pretty deep, but the core question we're grappling with is, can we actually transform painful experiences into a source of creative energy?
And what's particularly interesting is the way this material bridges the gap between ancient wisdom and modern science.
Yeah.
We'll be looking at how trauma can actually rewire the brain, but also how that process connects to the concept of blocked energy in the chakras, as described in Kundalini philosophy.
Okay, so before we go any further, let's make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
For those who might be new to these concepts, can you give us a quick breakdown of what Kundalini and chakras are all about?
Absolutely. In many Eastern traditions, Kundalini is seen as a powerful, dormant energy that resides at the base of the spine, often symbolized as a coiled serpent.
Okay.
Think of it like a wellspring of potential waiting to be activated.
Got it.
And the chakras are these energy centers located along the spine, each associated with different aspects of our physical, emotional, and spiritual being.
So how do these concepts relate to trauma?
Well, the idea is that when we experience trauma, it can disrupt the flow of energy through the chakras, particularly the lower ones, which are associated with our sense of safety, security, and grounding.
Yeah.
It's like the energy gets stuck, creating blockages that can manifest in a variety of ways, both physically and emotionally.
That makes sense. It's almost like the analogy used in our source material.
Right.
The idea of trauma being like a frozen river.
Yes. That's a powerful image. Just like a frozen river holds all this potential energy locked beneath the surface. Trauma can freeze our emotional energy, leaving us feeling stuck, numb, or disconnected.
But the source material also suggests that just like a frozen river can thaw and release that energy,
Right.
we too can learn to work with our trauma and potentially even transform it into a source of strength.
Precisely. And that's where the connection to Kundalini comes in. Many practices like Kundalini Yoga and meditation are specifically designed to help release those blockages and allow that dormant energy to flow more freely.
It's fascinating how these ancient practices are now being studied by neuroscientists, and they're actually finding some really interesting correlations between what's happening on an energetic level and what's happening in the brain.
Absolutely. There's growing research on neuroplasticity,
Right.
which is the brain's ability to change and adapt throughout life. And what they're finding is that trauma can actually alter the physical structure of the brain, particularly the amygdala, which is our fear center, and the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational thought and decision-making.
So all right, if I'm understanding correctly, trauma can essentially put the brain in a constant state of fight or flight, making it difficult to think clearly or regulate emotions.
Exactly. And this aligns with what many spiritual traditions have been saying for centuries, that trauma disrupts our energy flow and can leave us feeling trapped in survival mode.
So it's like we're looking at the same phenomenon from two different perspectives, the scientific and the spiritual, and they're actually converging in some really interesting ways.
It's a beautiful example of how ancient wisdom and modern science can complement and enrich one another.
Okay, so we've talked about how trauma can impact us on both a physical and an energetic level.
Right.
But what about the idea of inherited trauma? The source material touches on this concept as well.
Yeah.
And it's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
It is a fascinating and complex area of study. The field of epigenetics is exploring how the experiences of our ancestors can actually leave biological markers on our DNA, influencing our gene expression.
Wow.
And potentially even predisposing us to certain physical or emotional patterns.
So it's not just our own personal experiences that shape us, but the experiences of those who came before us, which is a pretty profound realization.
Absolutely. And if we connect this back to the concept of Kundalini, it's almost like these inherited traumas could be seen as collective energetic blocks passed down through generations.
So we're not just dealing with our own individual stuff, but potentially carrying the weight of our ancestors' experiences as well.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it? And it highlights the interconnectedness of all beings.
This is all incredibly fascinating, but I have to admit, it's also a bit overwhelming. We've got trauma rewiring the brain-blocked energy in the chakras and the inherited patterns from our ancestors.
Right.
It's a lot to take in.
I can understand that feeling. But here's where things start to get really interesting, because the source material doesn't just leave us with a sense of doom and gloom.
Okay.
It actually offers a path forward, a way to potentially transform these wounds into sources of strength and wisdom.
And that that path involves Kundalini awakening. We want to remind you to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with your friends.
In part, yes. But it's not as simple as just snapping your fingers and suddenly experiencing a blissful surge of energy.
Right,
It's a process, a journey of self-discovery and healing that involves working with the body, mind, and spirit.
So what does that process actually look like? What are some of the tools and techniques that can help us navigate this path of transformation?
Well, there are many different approaches, and what works best for one person might not be the right fit for another. But some of the practices mentioned in our source material include Kundalini Yoga, meditation, breathwork, and somatic therapies.
That's quite a range. Can you unpack some of those a bit more for us?
Of course. Let's start with Kundalini Yoga, which is specifically designed to work with the energy systems of the body. It combines physical postures, breath-controlled chanting, and meditation to awaken and channel Kundalini energy.
I've heard a bit about Kundalini Yoga, but I've always been a bit intimidated by it. It seems pretty intense.
It can be, but there are also many gentle and accessible practices within Kundalini Yoga. The key is to find a qualified teacher and start slowly listening to your body and honoring your own pace.
That makes sense. What about meditation? How does that play into this process of transformation?
Meditation is an incredibly powerful tool for cultivating self-awareness, calming the nervous system, and accessing deeper states of consciousness. And within the Kundalini tradition, there's specific meditations designed to work with different chakras and energy channels.
So it's not just about sitting quietly and trying to empty your mind.
Not necessarily. There are many different types of meditation, some involving focused attention, others involving visualization, and still others involving mantra repetition. The key is to find a practice that resonates with you and supports your individual needs.
You also mentioned breath work. What's
Yeah.
the connection between breath and trauma transformation?
The breath is a powerful bridge between the body and mind. When we experience trauma, our breathing patterns can become shallow and constricted, but by consciously working with the breath, we can start to regulate our nervous system, release tension, and create more space for healing.
So it's almost like retraining the body to respond to stress in a healthier way.
Exactly. And there are many different breathwork techniques, from simple practices like diaphragmatic breathing to more dynamic techniques that can help us access and release deep-seated emotional patterns.
And what about somatic therapies? How do those fit into the picture?
Somatic therapies focus on the connection between the body and mind, recognizing that trauma is often stored in the body as well as the mind. These therapies can involve a variety of techniques, including movement, touch, and sensory awareness, to help release trauma from the body and promote a sense of safety and grounding.
That makes a lot of sense, especially considering the research we discussed earlier about how trauma can actually alter the physical structure of the brain.
Precisely. And this is where the bridge between ancient wisdom and modern science becomes even more evident. Many of the techniques used in somatic therapies are actually very similar to the practices used in traditional healing systems around the world for centuries.
It's like we're rediscovering these ancient practices and understanding them in a new light through the lens of modern science.
Exactly. And this convergence of ancient wisdom and modern research is creating some incredibly powerful tools for healing and transformation.
So if someone is listening to this and they're feeling called to explore some of these practices, where would you recommend they start?
That's a great question. I would say the most important thing is to find a qualified teacher or practitioner who resonates with you and who you feel safe and supported by. Do your research, ask for recommendations, and trust your intuition. It's also important to start slowly and gently, honoring your own pace and listening to your body's wisdom.
That's such valuable advice. And it speaks to the importance of self-compassion throughout this process.
Absolutely. Healing from trauma is not a linear journey. There will be ups and downs, moments of progress, and moments of feeling stuck. But by approaching ourselves with kindness, patience, and understanding, we create a supportive inner environment for transformation to unfold.
That's such a beautiful reminder. We often put so much pressure on ourselves to heal quickly or perfectly. But true healing is about embracing the journey with all its complexities and imperfections.
It's about learning to befriend ourselves, to meet ourselves where we are with love and acceptance.
This conversation is really starting to shift my perspective on trauma. I'm starting to see how it doesn't have to define us. It could be an opportunity for growth, a catalyst for awakening a deeper level of resilience and wisdom within ourselves.
It's about reclaiming our power, not as victims, but as alchemists capable of transforming our wounds into sources of strength and beauty.
Speaking of transformation, the source material also delves into some pretty fascinating connections between trauma healing, and spiritual awakening. It suggests that as we begin to heal those deep-seated wounds, we can start to tap into a more expanded sense of ourselves and our connection to something greater.
That's a powerful insight. Many spiritual traditions describe trauma as a kind of soul fragmentation, a separation from our true nature. And as we begin to heal those fragments, we begin to reconnect with our wholeness, our divinity, our interconnectedness with all of creation.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's like those hidden codes we talked about earlier aren't just about unlocking creative energy, but about unlocking our full potential as human beings.
I love that analogy, and it reminds me of Carl Jung's work on the shadow self. He believed that by confronting and integrating those hidden parts of ourselves, we could achieve a greater sense of wholeness and individuation.
So it's not about trying to erase those dark parts of ourselves, but about embracing them, integrating them, and recognizing that they too hold a piece of our truth.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that even the most challenging experiences can serve as teachers, guiding us towards greater self-awareness, compassion, and wisdom.
This is all so profound, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. Is there anything else in the source material that really stands out to you?
There is one thing that really struck me. The source material touches on the idea that if trauma can be inherited, could the potential for healing and transformation also be passed down through generations?
That's a powerful question, and one that researchers are beginning to explore. If epigenetic markers can carry the weight of past traumas, is it possible that they can also carry the seeds of resilience, wisdom, and healing? It's a hopeful thought, right? That the work we do to heal ourselves might not only benefit us individually, but also ripple out to future generations.
It highlights the profound interconnectedness of all beings and suggests that our actions have a far greater impact than we might realize.
That's both inspiring and a bit daunting. It's like we have a responsibility not only to ourselves, but to the lineage to break those cycles of trauma and pass on a legacy of healing and wholeness.
It's a beautiful vision, and it speaks to the transformative power of love and compassion. As we heal ourselves, we also contribute to the healing of the world around us.
This whole deep dive has really shifted my perspective. I'm starting to see trauma not as a life sentence, but as an opportunity for growth, a doorway to a deeper understanding of ourselves and our potential.
It's about recognizing that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope. There's always a path toward healing, growth, and transformation.
And what's really empowering is that we have agency in that process. We're not just passive recipients of our experiences. We have the power to choose how we respond, how we heal, and how we transform those wounds into sources of strength and wisdom.
That's the essence of resilience, isn't it? The ability to bounce back from adversity not unscathed, but stronger and more whole.
This has been such a rich and insightful conversation. Thank you for guiding us through this complex and often challenging terrain. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up?
My final thought would be to encourage a sense of curiosity and openness as you continue to explore these concepts. There's no one right way to heal from trauma, so trust your intuition, experiment with different practices, and find what resonates with you. And most importantly, be kind to yourself throughout the process. Healing takes time, and it's not always linear. Celebrate your victories, learn from your challenges, and never give up on the journey towards wholeness.
Beautifully said. And remember, dear listener, that you are not alone on this path. There are resources available, communities of support, and a growing body of knowledge to guide you. So keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of your own being. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with anyone who might be interested in these hidden wonders of the universe.
Until next time.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep expanding your awareness.
That's it.
There are 2 videos on your screen. Click one to continue your journey.